by the score of 22-14. 11-0. 11-0.
Sanderson sends it deeper down the middle of the Rambo for a touchdown.
Intercepted at the 32 by Derek Smith. He's to the 20. He's to his right at the 17. He's to the 15. He's to the 10. To the 5. Touchdown Oklahoma.
To his left, to the 25, splits two men. Now to his left at the 40, 45. He's gonna go all the way. Touchdown, Michigan.
Rodgers takes the ball at the 30. He's hit and got away. Back upfield to the 35, to the 40. He's to the 45. He's to the 50, to the 45, to the 40, to the 35, to the 20, to the 10. He's all the way home.
The Great Gridiron Rivalries. Featuring Oklahoma versus Nebraska. Nothing is quite as American as a college football Saturday. And perhaps nothing is quite so dramatic or compelling as the spectacle of two college football teams squaring off against each other, battling back and forth for 60 minutes, each team striving to defeat the other in front of thousands of cheering spectators. Those Saturday games are a tradition deeply embedded not only into the fabric of college life, but also American culture and history itself. Nowhere is this more evident than in the deeply rooted rivalries that have grown more substantial with every thrilling victory or crushing defeat over the past 90 years. When you consider the greatest matchups, you think of games like Ohio State versus Michigan, USC versus UCLA, Alabama versus Auburn, Army versus Navy, California versus Stanford, Florida versus Georgia. Or how about Texas versus Texas A&M and Harvard versus Yale? These two series have been played for over 118 years. In the Midwest, many believe the #1 college football rivalry is that played yearly between Oklahoma and Nebraska, the Battle of the Big Reds. Although the Nebraska Cornhuskers played their first game back in 1890, they would not play their first game against the Oklahoma Sooners until 1912. It's doubtful that the crowd who watched that first game had any idea that such an intense rivalry would develop and still matter over 90 years later.
They have, without question, the greatest tradition in college football consistently that I have witnessed, because they were ranked #1 in the 60s and 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s.
So Oklahoma, I guess, in a way was our friend. They weren't our enemy, and that they were the standard that we had to live up to. And rather than try to pull them down to our level, we had to get up to their level. And so it was painful, but I guess it was instructional.
It's one of those matchups that year in and year out, you never know what's going to happen. One team may look like, from a record standpoint, they should win the game, and next thing you know, the other team wins, and that type of thing. And for us to get through that period of time, we were fortunate, because Nebraska always has great teams.
Along the way, there has been a long list of storied names involved. Coaches like Oklahoma's Bud Wilkinson and Barry Switzer, whose teams have each won 3 national championships and 302 coaching victories between them. Or Nebraska's own tandem of Bob Devaney and Tom Osborne, whose teams have won 5 national championships, along with 356 coaching victories. Players like Oklahoma's Heisman Trophy trio of Billy Vessels, Steve Owens, and Billy Sims. Nebraska counters with their own roster of Heisman winners like Johnny Rogers, Mike Rozier, and most recently, Husker quarterback Eric Crouch. Through it all, there's been the game between the Big Reds. Year after year, game after game, victory after victory. Or worse, defeat after defeat. From that humble beginning back in 1912, which Nebraska won in Lincoln by the score of 13-9, each game has evolved, adding to the legend, the history, the rivalry. Some of the early milestones include the first game at Memorial Stadium, where the Cornhuskers defeated Oklahoma 24-0. In 1925, Nebraska defeated the Sooners 12-0 for its 200th all-time win. The 1937 game would feature a scoreless tie. In 1942, Nebraska will defeat Oklahoma again 7-0 for its 300th all-time win. However, starting in 1943, Oklahoma will rattle off 16 consecutive victories, while winning by an average score of 36-8. In 1950, Oklahoma would defeat Nebraska 49-35. Sophomore running back Billy Vessels will finish the day with 208 yards on 18 carries, while rushing for 3 TDs. Oklahoma quarterback Claude Arnold also rushes for 2 TDs while throwing for another. The win stretches Oklahoma's victory streak to 30 games and ensures a 3rd straight Sugar Bowl invitation for the Sooners. They defeat Oklahoma A&M to earn the school's first national championship, the first of 3 under legend in the making, Coach Bud Wilkinson. Bill Vessels was the first Sooner to win college football's most prestigious individual award. During his Oklahoma career, Vessels leads the Sooners to a 24-4-1 record. During his senior season, Curly, as he was known, rushed for 1,072 yards on 167 carries, scoring 17 TDs. He also connected for 7 passes and 2 TDs during the season, leading the team to an 8-1-1 record while finishing 4th in the nation. His career totals include 2,085 yards on 329 rushes and 33 TDs. He also caught 21 passes for 391 yards with an additional 4 TDs. Vessels, one of the first great Sooners, stands as OU's 17th ranked rusher. In 1953, he was the first player taken in the draft by the Baltimore Colts. In 1954, while ranked number 3, Oklahoma and Coach Bud Wilkinson's Sooners had their highest score in defeating the Cornhuskers 55-7. Even though the Sooners were in the midst of an NCAA record 47-game winning streak, they weren't allowed to go to a bowl under the conference's no-repeat rule. Despite their loss to the Sooners, Nebraska got the bowl invitation but lost to Duke. In the mid-50s, Oklahoma continued winning, including 2 more national championships in both 1955 and 1956. That year's Battle of the Big Reds would feature a 54-6 Sooner victory. By 1959, Oklahoma had not lost in 74 consecutive conference games, and the Cornhuskers had not beaten the Sooners in 16 years, from 1943 to 1958. The date was Halloween, Nebraska's homecoming game in Lincoln. The game was close throughout, but by the end, Nebraska would shock Oklahoma by the score of 25-21. A last-minute Sooner comeback attempt failed when Ron Mead intercepts a Bobby Boyd pass in the end zone. With the surprise win, Nebraska Chancellor Clifford Harden will cancel classes for the following Monday so that students will have an extra day to celebrate. The next couple of years, the teams trade wins and losses. Going into the 1963 game, both teams were ranked and looking toward their annual battle when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas on Friday, November 22nd. Although both teams did not want to play, conference officials made the decision to go ahead with the game because Oklahoma had 1 game remaining and the Orange Bowl needed a representative. With the nation in mourning, the Sooners and Cornhuskers went ahead and played, with the Huskers dominating, taking a 17-0 lead into the 4th quarter. After an Oklahoma score, Nebraska suddenly scored 2 TDs in a 1-minute, 32-second span to take a 29-7 lead. Not to be outdone, the Sooners scored twice in the game's final 2 minutes for the final of 29-20. In 1964, under new head coach Gomer Jones, the unranked Sooners gave the number 4 Huskers their only regular season loss, winning 17-7. Surprisingly, the exact same scenario will play out in 1966, when the Sooners beat Nebraska 10-9. In 1970, the Battle of the Big Red saw Nebraska come into the game ranked number 3. In the game, the Cornhuskers would have to come from behind twice to notch a 28-21 win. Junior quarterback Jerry Taggy scored the winning TD with 7:42 remaining, capping a 53-yard drive. Nebraska would finish with an 11-0-1 record and win their first national championship for coach Bob Devaney. The Nebraska Cornhuskers would win their second straight national championship in 1971, then see the retirement of Coach Devaney at the end of the 72 season. Along with his back-to-back national championships, Devaney would also win 8 Big 8 titles in his 11-year career at Nebraska. His record of 136 wins, 30 losses, and 7 ties left him as the winningest active coach in the nation at the time. Among his honors was his induction into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1976. He served as Nebraska's athletic director from 1967 to 1992, before retiring in 1996. He passed away in 1997. (1973) would see coaching changes at both Oklahoma and Nebraska. For the Cornhuskers, Tom Osborne would replace the legendary Bob Devaney, while at Oklahoma, Barry Switzer came in to replace Chuck Fairbanks.
Both coaches want to win. You know, they want to go to the Orange Bowl and they want to win a Big 8 title, and they do whatever necessary to win. And they both are great coaches, and you know, they have respect for each other. They don't take anything for granted. Each year, you know, they know it's going to be the game of the year, so they put a lot of energy and effort into outthinking each other.
1974 would see another Sooner win, this time 28-14, while going 11-0 and winning their first national championship under Switzer. The following year, the Sooners continued both their winning ways, defeating the Huskers 35-10 and winning their second straight national championship for Barry Switzer.
It's a great tribute to those players and coaches and fans and all of us as a team to be able to do that, and probably, you know, to win it, to go back to back. The second one was probably, to me, probably more meaningful than the first one.
Leroy Selman, along with his brothers Dewey and Lucius, played for Oklahoma during that time.
Before we got there, you always heard about that game. It was such a huge game, and at that time was the old Big 8 conference. And usually it had certainly sometimes national championship implications and certainly bowl game type implications. The competition in that game was this unusual. You don't get it that way, game in and game out.
In his 4-year Sooner career, Leroy Selman never lost to Nebraska.
You know, the players are all fired up, the coaches are ready to go, the fans are all into it, and you know, the student body, they're all excited about it. So it's one of those unique types of matchups in college football.
By the time the 1978 Battle of the Big Reds rolled around, Nebraska was ranked number 4.
I think we lost them 6 times in a row. I think maybe the last time was under Bob, and then 5 straight under me. And I realized that at some point we're going to have to win, beat Oklahoma, or I wasn't going to be around much longer. And so it was almost like you could win 10 games or 9, and if you lost to Oklahoma, you had a bad year.
This year, however, 6 fumbles by the number 1 ranked Sooners that are recovered by the Cornhuskers change all that. Rick Burns, who rushed for 113 yards and a TD, scored on a 5-yard run in the second quarter. And I.M. Hipp scored on an 8-yard run in the third to provide the scoring for Nebraska. With 11:51 left, a field goal by Billy Todd puts the Huskers ahead 17-14. Oklahoma's biggest drop was at the Nebraska 3-yard line by Billy Sims with 3:27 left. The second time in as many possessions that Sims fumbled deep in Nebraska territory. Jim Pillen would recover to seal the upset, and final score of 17-14 in Nebraska's favor.
When people ask me about the Oklahoma-Nebraska rivalry, that's the first game that jumps out at me, and it's people say that, well, I remember all the losses. I don't remember the wins. I remember the losses, and that one was devastating because we had been ranked number 1. We were number 1 going into the game. We were 9-0. We had a great football team. We fumbled 9 times that day. We lost 6 fumbles, and we only got beat 17-14.
Unfortunately, the Huskers lose their chance at a national championship when they are beaten in their final 2 games that year, including an upset by Missouri the week after their Oklahoma victory.
The best football team didn't win. I know that in my heart. We beat ourselves, but no one guy did it. We did it as a team. We played good on defense, we played good on offense. We made errors both ways, both ends of the field. It cost us. You're a great football team, man. We've come a long way. We still finish up in a great year. Do it with pride, be your chin up. You don't have to duck your head and not look a person in the eye. You look every guy in the eye, every person you meet, every reporter. You don't have to duck your head, people, because you're winners.
Nebraska wins the Big 8 title to get an automatic Orange Bowl bid. However, in a surprise move, the Bowl Committee invites number 4 ranked Oklahoma.
All right, now what has happened is that with Georgia getting beat, the Tide is like getting beat, so that puts Alabama. Penn State more than likely is going to go to the Sugar Bowl to play Alabama. Now what it does to us, it does this. The Orange Bowl is meeting right now in an executive meeting. They're considering, I don't know, the possibility of taking us, or probably more likely to ask us to come play Nebraska again in Orange Bowl.
On behalf of the Orange Bowl Committee, I would like to formally extend an invitation to the University of Oklahoma to meet the University of Nebraska in the Orange Bowl Classic on January the 1st. I'm sure that you have been advised that we have asked, as your opponent, the University of Oklahoma.
We think that the rematch will be a very exciting game, and one with a tremendous amount of appeal. Hello?
In the Orange Bowl, the Sooners cruised to a 31-10 lead after 3 quarters of play. Heisman Trophy winner Billy Sims scored twice. Sooner quarterback Thomas Lott was also responsible for 2 scores. The final score would read Oklahoma 31, Nebraska 24, as the Sooners avenged their only loss of the year to the Cornhuskers.
Best football team in the country because we beat everybody we played this year. We're the only team that did it. See, I'm going to tell you, the difference in this ball game in Lincoln, we fumbled 1 time. They never stopped us offensively. The offense helped the defense tonight. You had a super job. You got to have a lot of pride. You had a great career, all the seniors. All right!
In 1978, Sims set a Big 8 single-season rushing record with 1,762 yards on 231 carries, averaging more than 7 yards per carry. He also topped the 200-yard mark in 4 different games, a school record. For his career, Sims gained 3,813 yards on 538 attempts and 50 touchdowns, and stands 3rd on the all-time rushing list. opening game of a new decade would see both teams ranked, as 74,000 plus fans were in attendance at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln as the game got underway.
Heads. All right, did you understand that he called heads Nebraska? And it's tails, so Nebraska wins the toss.
By the fourth quarter, Nebraska had fought back to take a 17-14 lead on quarterback Jeff Quinn's 1-yard plunge. Nebraska fans responded by throwing oranges onto the field, signifying the expectation of another Orange Bowl appearance by the Cornhuskers.
You know, it's the moment, you know, everyone knowing that this team is going to go to the Orange Bowl, if it's Oklahoma, if it's Nebraska, or if it's Colorado, whatever, you know. It's fun to see. It's just great the fans can get involved in something like that.
After the turf is cleared of the oranges, the Sooners, starting at their own 20, promptly marched down the field in just 8 plays. On the third play of the drive, from the Oklahoma 43, quarterback J.C. Watts executes the option perfectly with a pitch to Buster Rhymes, who takes it all the way to the Husker 14. 5 plays later, and with just under a minute left, Rhymes goes over the top on a 1-yard dive to score the decisive TD in a 21-17 Oklahoma win.
You have your hopes up so high that you're going to win this game, and then he comes back and score and take all the juice out of you, you know, all the excitement.
I want to say something, man. We got a game next week. We got to back up everything we said. And I want to know one thing. Are there any good Mexican restaurants in Miami?
Nebraska running back Roger Craig played in the Battle of the Big Reds from 1980 to 1982, winning 2 of 3 contests for coach Tom Osborne.
It was like the game of the year. You know, you beat Oklahoma, you go to the Orange Bowl. So, you know, that was a big rivalry, you know, for Nebraska and for Oklahoma as well.
Craig talked about the tradition of Nebraska football.
I miss hearing those roar of the cheer of the fans. You know, it's incredible, especially after a big run. You know, I still get goosebumps thinking about the fans. They're awesome.
The Huskers would be ranked #1 throughout 1983, defeating Oklahoma 28-21 in that year's contest.
Phelps trying to set up a screen. It's intercepted. Picked off. That is Strasburger. He's dropped. It looks like he might be short. He's at the 1-yard line, but you'll never know. We may never find him. They're tearing the goalpost down, and we still have 26 seconds left in this game. Boy, look at the intensity on that man's face.
However, an Orange Bowl loss to Miami would prevent them from winning another national championship. By 1985, the Sooners would regain their footing and finish with a 27-7 win over Nebraska, an 11-1 record, and another national championship for Barry Switzer.
Got a chance to win 600. Oklahoma's 600th win today. Man, I don't know, you know, sometimes you take for granted when you're in the family and a part of it, you don't know what it looks from the outside. All the respect that people have around the country of Oklahoma football.
The 1986 campaign would see the #3 ranked Oklahoma team defeat the #2 ranked Nebraska Cornhuskers by the score of 20-17. It would be Oklahoma's 600th all-time win. By the 1988 game, Nebraska was ranked #7, while Oklahoma was ranked 9th. Unlike most of the previous games, this year's affair would be an extremely low-scoring one, with the Cornhuskers notching a 7-3 victory. It will be Coach Barry Switzer's last regular season loss. In Switzer's 16-year career at Oklahoma, he would finish with 157 wins, 29 losses, and 4 ties. He would also lead the Sooners to 3 national championships, 12 Big 8 conference titles, and 13 bowl appearances, winning 8. His back-to-back national championships would mark the first time in history that a team had won back-to-back more than once.
Barry is a player's type of coach. Of course, knows the game very well, very talented, great motivator, and his heart just goes out to the players. And you can see that it's the genuineness about him. And I think that's what we all of us as players loved about him and respected him for that, and would go out and play our hardest because we wanted to see him succeed.
After leaving Oklahoma, Switzer would coach in the NFL, leading the Dallas Cowboys to a Super Bowl title in 1995. In the next 5 years, the Nebraska Cornhuskers and their vaunted black shirt defense would win 4 of 5 games against the Oklahoma Sooners. Each year, the Huskers' overall record would improve, and by 1994, Nebraska was looking like a true national power once again. Nebraska entered the game with the #1 ranking, although backup quarterback Brooke Behringer steps in for the injured Tommy Frazier. The Huskers would depend on their defense in this contest, and Oklahoma could only muster 179 total yards, with 47 of those coming in the second half. The game's only touchdown comes in the fourth quarter, when Abdul Muhammad catches a 44-yard pass to set up a Brooke Behringer 1-yard run. The final score would read 13-3, and the Huskers would finish with a 13-0 record to win Tom Osborne's first national title as a head coach. In the 1995 game, the Cornhuskers were once again ranked #1 and were working on a 22-game winning streak. Again, it's a game for the black shirt defense as they score the first 2 touchdowns, with Jamel Williams returning an interception 36 yards in the second quarter, and Tony Veland running a fumble recovery back 57 yards in the third. The Sooners can only generate 241 yards of offense, 51 on the ground. Nebraska goes on to defeat Oklahoma 37-0, winning its 36th straight regular season game. The Huskers win the Fiesta Bowl and have back-to-back national championships. The 1995 team topped the all-time Sagarin rankings and is widely considered Tom Osborne's best team and among the best college teams in history. If the 1995 Husker team was considered a strong one, the Sooners probably thought the 96 team was off the charts. Jason Peters sacks Justin Fuente on the Sooners' first play, and that sets the tone of the game.
He takes a handoff, rolls right, and he's sacked just as he turned his back. There was Jason Peters all over him for a loss.
The Huskers score 45 points in the second and third quarters.
And he dives in for the touchdown. Off to the running back. Fuente has his pass tipped to the line of scrimmage. It's going to be intercepted to the 30 by Mike Minter. Minter down to the 25, and Minter returns it to the 24-yard line. How excited is that young man?
When it's over, the #5 ranked Cornhuskers will have handed Oklahoma its worst defeat of the series, winning 73-21. It is also the highest scoring game, with 94 total points, along with the most points ever given up by an Oklahoma team. And the 52-point margin of victory is the largest in the series history. That record will be erased in the 1997 contest as the #1 ranked Cornhuskers increase it to 62 points as they defeat the Oklahoma Sooners 69-7.
Running the option right side, Brandon Daniels keeps the football. He's separated from the football loose. It's picked up by Tony Ortiz. Ortiz has it. The play at the line of scrimmage. The southpaw drops back in the pocket. He's hit and sacked. And it's Grant Wistrom who gets the loose football back at the 40. And what are they going to call?
The Huskers lead 34-0 at the half. The scoring onslaught included TD runs by Joel Makovica.
Back at the 41-yard line of Oklahoma. Here's London rolling to the right side, gets a block, now fires a pass, got Newcomb down there, he's got it to 10, and he's shoved out of bounds.
and a touchdown run by Carell Buckhalter. Cornhusker quarterback Scott Frost also gets in on the scoring action. Bobby Newcomb catches another TD pass. It is 55-0 before the Sooners scored their first points. It is Osborne's 250th career win, and in what turns out to be his final season, the Cornhuskers finish with a 13-0 record to win a split national championship. He finished his career with a 13-13 record against Oklahoma. Coach Tom Osborne would finish his 25-year career at Nebraska with a record of 255 wins, 49 losses, and 3 ties. His teams would win a total of 3 championships, including back-to-back titles in 1994 and 1995. They would also win 13 conference championships and make 25 consecutive bowl appearances. He was the fastest coach to win 200 games and the fastest to reach 250. Osborne is currently a member of the United States Congress. By the time of the 2000 Battle of the Big Reds, Oklahoma was working on a 7-game losing streak, and the two teams were facing each other after a 2-year hiatus, which came after 71 consecutive seasons. Nebraska had won 9 of the past 11 games and was ranked number 1 for the 4th time in the last 5 meetings. Coming into the game, however, the Sooners had already knocked off 2 ranked teams. Early on, the Huskers lead 14-0 on scoring drives of 76 and 91 yards, the first 2 times they touched the ball.
Crouch under center, straight eye, the fake to the fullback, Crouch back to pass, he looks, he lobs a pass, has a man wide open, caught at the 9, to the 5, and touchdown Nebraska.
After that, it will be all Oklahoma, as the Sooners hold Nebraska scoreless for the next 53 minutes of football.
We're very prepared, but we're so excited that we're overrunning plays. And like 3 plays we overran, they got big plays off of. And Coach Stoops, Mike Stoops, pulled us to the side. Him and Coach Venables was like, just calm down. You guys know what's happening. Just play the game. Just be under control. And once we did that, calm down, all the emotions of the rivalry, everybody just relaxed, and we gave it to them.
In one of the most dominant second quarters ever played by an Oklahoma squad, the Sooners scored 24 unanswered points to take a 24-14 halftime lead, with scoring drives of 74, 80, 2, and 54 yards.
6-man rush, Heupel lobs a pass downfield, and it's incomplete. Oh, he caught it! He caught it on the ground. Andre Wolfel deflected the ball away from the defensive cornerback, Deion Booker. The ball came down while he was laying on the ground right to him.
Meanwhile, the Cornhusker offense records just 1 first down and 16 yards of total offense in the second quarter. The key contributors for Oklahoma are quarterback Josh Heupel, who passes for 300 yards and a TD on 20 of 34 throwing, and DB Derek Strait, who returns an interception 32 yards for a score.
Intercepted at the 32 by Derek Strait. He's to the 20. He's to his right at the 17. He's to the 15. He's to the 10. To the 5. Touchdown Oklahoma.
Oklahoma finishes the season unbeaten and ranked number 1, defeating Florida State in the Orange Bowl. The Sooners win another national championship, the first for Coach Bob Stoops in only his 2nd season at Oklahoma.
He came in and he put his foot down. He said, this is what we're going to do, and you guys were out of shape. You guys weren't doing this right, you weren't doing that right, and we worked towards that to be better. And it was a great experience with Stoops.
In 2001, Nebraska would come into the game ranked number 2 in the BCS, while Oklahoma is ranked number 1.
And here come the
The winner of the Battle of the Big Reds would have the inside track to the Big 12 championship and a trip to the Rose Bowl, site of the national championship game.
40, 45, 50, 45, 40, 35, 40. Just tripped up from behind, and down he goes.
the Sooner defense holds the Cornhuskers to just 164 total yards on the ground.
Everybody in tight. Here is a handoff to Dietrich over the left side. He's in! Touchdown!
Nebraska, on the other hand, had entered the game as the nation's top-ranked rushing offense with a 338.8 yards per game average.
First down and 10 to go. Here's a handoff to Thunder, who gives it back to Mike Stuntz. He's going to throw it. He's got a man out there for 40. It is Eric Crouch. 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Just puts a knee down. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, and Oklahoma has no more timeouts. This is going to take care of it. The Huskers come into this one, and they beat Oklahoma.
Despite the lack of offensive production, Nebraska defeats the Sooners 20-10, as Oklahoma suffers its first defeat in 20 games.
We lost sight of our goals. We got ahead of ourselves. We made a lot of mental errors. And when you play back the film, you see we weren't lining up right. We just had that swagger where we got cocky. We really did, and we paid for it.
Based on his performance in 2001, Nebraska quarterback Eric Crouch will win the Heisman Trophy. Out of all those head-to-head contests, there are certain games that are bound to stand out. Which game would Oklahoma fans consider their top win against Nebraska? Maybe it's the 1987 game, a contest billed as the Game of the Century too. In the week prior to that game, Nebraska had taken the #1 ranking from the Sooners, dropping them to #2. The game was played in front of 76,000 fans in Lincoln, with the Cornhuskers scoring first on a 25-yard run by I-back Keith Jones late in the first quarter. After that, it is all Oklahoma, as the Sooner defense, led by Dante Jones and Ricky Dixon, shuts down the high-powered Cornhusker offense. Nebraska finishes with only 235 yards, 289 yards under its nation-leading average. Incredibly, the Huskers cross midfield only 3 times. Dixon has 2 interceptions, returning one to the Nebraska 13-yard line to set up Oklahoma's first TD early in the second half. Patrick Collins gives the Sooners the lead with this spectacular run. If not for 4 fumbles and an interception, the final score could have been much worse than 17-7.
When we went back out that second half, you had to believe. You had to believe. Because, man, we didn't help ourselves much. We didn't help the defense. Terrible field position, couldn't make first downs, and all of a sudden we make a play. Make a play. We score, get it in. But I'm going to tell you something, man. That goal line stand, just like Texas. Hey, you don't do it once in a lifetime. You did it twice. Against the #1 team in the country both times. Instead of 1 game ball defense, you get 2 game balls.
On the other hand, maybe Nebraska fans might think that their top game is the 1971 contest, fondly remembered as the Game of the Century, and what turns out to be one of the most memorable games in college football history. Nebraska comes into the Thanksgiving Day contest in Norman ranked #1, while Oklahoma is ranked #2. Heisman Trophy winner Johnny Rodgers gets things started with an incredible 72-yard punt return.
Takes the ball at the 30. He's hit and got away. Back upfield to the 35, to the 40. He's to the 45. He's to the 50, to the 45, to the 40, to the 35, to the 20, to the 10. He's all the way home.
But from there, the two teams would battle back and forth as Oklahoma's Jack Mildren puts the Sooners into the lead, throwing a 16-yard TD pass with 7 minutes left.
Holy moly! Man, woman, and child did that. Put him in the aisles.
It is the only time all season that the Huskers even trailed in a game. Then Husker quarterback Jerry Tagge promptly drove Nebraska on one of the greatest drives of all time, converting on 3 third downs, the final one when Jeff Kinney capped a 12-play, 74-yard march with a 2-yard plunge with 1:38 left to put Nebraska ahead 35-31.
Not to be denied, Jeff Kinney, his 3rd touchdown of the afternoon.
Nebraska's black shirt defense would hold up as Oklahoma tried a last-ditch rally.
Mildren looking. Mildren getting away. The ball knocked down by, guess who? Rich Glover, number 79.
Nebraska ran out the clock to preserve the 35-31 victory, and the game of the century was over.
I think it's just by coincidence, many times in big ball games, this is going to happen. It's going to be a tight fit. One team is going to be has the opportunity to win in the 4th quarter, and so it means it's a close game. Well, a lot of times our games were won in the last couple of minutes, and we were fortunate enough to do that. We were behind, I think 6 times we were behind, and we came back to win ball games with a few minutes to go in the game. I think people coined that as Sooner magic. That was just some players making some plays. Keith Jackson, Jamel Holloway, Billy Sims, J.C. Watts, Thomas Lott. It doesn't make any difference who they are. They were great, outstanding players, and players make big plays in big games to win.
So now, as a new century has begun, it's interesting to consider where the rivalry will be in another 100 years. In the near future, will one team ever establish dominance over the other? Or will there be small winning streaks by each side here and there? Will both teams continue to play the role of the spoiler, ruining perfect seasons and national championship hopes? Will either team ever have legendary coaches again, like Bud Wilkinson or Barry Switzer at Oklahoma, or Tom Osborne or Bob Devaney at Nebraska? Will they ever establish a new dynasty? All interesting questions, but the answers will only fully be known 100 years from now, as two great universities compete against each other in a contest of wills in a football game known as the Battle of the Big Reds.